In this section, we're going to dive deeper into the Unity physics system. We're going to take a look at some interesting bugs that you may have already noticed and make it so that our character's jump and movement feels nice and fluid. The first thing that I want to show you is an issue that you might have run into where your character can kind of hang from one of these platforms. You can see it represented right here. I can't actually jump. I'm just kind of stuck hanging from that platform. And if I go to the scene view, you can kind of see what's going on here. If you look at our character, he's got this little green collider showing up, and it's landing on top of this box right here. Let me turn off the sprite renderers for both of those so you can see it better. Here's our player, and you can see that he is just barely touching right here on this little line. It's not actually touching, but the physics system is counting it as close enough and counting it as a touch. So that's causing a big problem for me because our player doesn't really slide off of there, and our player can't jump because the center line here isn't in the ground. Let's turn those sprite renderers back on. You can see it a little bit better. And now go back over to my game view, and if I try to jump, remember, nothing happens. I can still kind of move off to the right and fall down a little bit, but I don't like the way that that feels, and I don't like that I can easily get stuck on there. So we're going to make a couple of minor changes to fix this. The first thing that I want to do is go to the scene view, double click on the player to select them, and we're going to replace this polygon collider. The polygon collider will match up exactly with your sprite so that it lines up and outlines your exact sprite and gives you a very perfect collider, but that's not usually what we use with a player. Most of the time with a player, we want to use something a little bit smoother that moves quite a bit more fluidly. And in our case, in this specific scenario, we're going to want to go with a Capsule Collider 2D. So I'm going to hit Add Component with the player selected, go to Physics 2D, and choose a Capsule Collider 2D. By default, this is going to be way too large because of the sprite that I'm using. If I go select my sprite here, and go click on it, remember that it's a full-size sprite. It's going all the way up to there. There's lots of extra transparent edge, so it's not properly calculating that top part of the sprite. We can modify that, though, and you need to do this almost every time you set up a collider anyway. We can do that by going to our collider's properties. Let's collapse everything else. Find the Capsule Collider, and look right here at the size value. The size right now is a 2. If I change this to a 1, you see it goes to about half the size, and I think the value I want is more like a 1.2. A 1.2 there, grab the Y and just drag it down so that it lines up, and I think that the correct value here is going to be a negative 0.4. This gives me a nice capsule where the very bottom of it lines up exactly with my feet, and it's going to be good for nice fluid movement. Now, if I just save like this, though, and go back and play, we're going to run into an issue. Let's save and see what that issue is. So I save, I press play. Remember, we removed the polygon collider, added that Capsule Collider. No other changes yet. Now I can run around still. Looks good. Okay, let's jump up on a platform. Okay, that looks good, and it feels kind of smooth, and I can kind of fall down off the edge there. But watch what happens if I try to jump multiple times. I keep jumping in the air. Like that, I've got unlimited jumps now. The reason for this, if we go look at our player, is that that grounded variable, that is grounded, is always true. And the reason that that is grounded is always true is, well, let's jump and watch this. I'm going to jump and then click pause while I'm falling. Go over to my scene view, double click on the player, and just take a quick peek at him. So what's actually happening, and I just wanted that so that I could see the player kind of up in the air, not actually on the ground. What's actually happening here is that this ray is technically intersecting this circle or this collider because it lines up exactly with the collider. So we have a couple of options. We could maybe move the collider up a little bit so that the ray isn't there. Maybe go to like a 0.39, and then the ray is right below it, but that's not really the best option. The other option, the one that I think we should use, is to add a layer mask, and we're going to dive into how to use layers in Unity and how you can use a layer mask to make it so that this collision check right here, this grounding check, ignores a player. To do that, we're going to need to stop playing. We're going to go to the player, and then we'll go to the layer section in the inspector. By default, you should have a default layer, transparent effects, ignore raycast, water, and UI. These haven't really changed the defaults, but we need to add in our own layer. And to do that, we're going to hit the Add Layer button. This will bring up the Tags and Layers inspector, which allows us to create up to, well, 31 layers, not counting the couple built-in ones. I'm going to use layer 6, and we're going to name this player with a capital P. This is going to be a layer for our players, and we're going to talk a lot about layers in a little bit, but you're going to see how these work. For now, just remember that we need to create a player one and then go re-click on the player because look, his layer is still set to default. When you create a new layer, it doesn't automatically assign that layer, so you need to go click the character and then reassign the layer. This happens every time you make a new layer. Remember that it doesn't actually assign that one because it brings up that menu and then you have to pick which one you're modifying. Okay, so we've added our player layer to the player, and if I save now and just press play, nothing is going to be different. All I've really done is tell the physics system, hey, this player, treat them separately if I tell you to, or just know that it's on a specific layer. So if I want to avoid collisions with things with my player, or I want to just check specific things, I can ignore that player or only check against players. Let's dive into the actual code though, because I think it'll make a lot more sense once we put the code together. So to write our code, we're going to open up the player script. And we're going to add a new serialized field here. Right after our jump sprite, we're going to add a serialized field, and it's going to be a layer mask. That's a capital L and a capital M, and we'll name it underscore layer mask. So we've got a layer mask here named underscore layer mask. Now we're going to take this layer mask. I'm going to copy the underscore layer mask. And in the part where we do our ray casting right here on line 39, we assign a hit, or we get back the first thing that little ray is hitting. Remember, we have the red visualization of the ray. What we can do here is go to the end of our raycast call. So after the 1F and right before that parentheses, and we can actually add in another comma. And the reason for this is that our raycast has 8 different overloads. We're only seeing, and when I say 8 different overloads, it's 8 different ways that this thing can be called. And I wish it wasn't cut off right there. But if you hit the arrow right here, you can actually bounce through all of the different ways that it can be called. And the reason that it can be called different ways is sometimes you want to pass in different parameters. You want to have different special conditions, or sometimes you want to get back out multiple results. You want the ray to go through multiple things and give you all of those back. But the one that we're going to use, I hit the comma and add a space, is that we can add a layer mask as the 4th parameter. So I do underscore layer mask. And what this is going to do is make it so that our raycast will now only work against the layers that we have selected in this layer mask. Let's go take a look at what that looks like in the inspector though. It'll probably make a whole lot more sense. So minimize, go select our player. And in the player script, we should get a nice layer mask for our jump. Or there we go, layer mask. And we'll choose everything except for player. So I'm going to choose everything and then uncheck player, press play. And this should resolve our jumping problem. So now our ray is no longer going to look at the player. There we go. I can't jump multiple times. I can jump once, but no more jumps after that. So it is working. Our ray is checking properly. If I look at the player here and I watch the isGrounded variable, you see that it's changing properly. If I change this mask back to player though at runtime, watch, I stay grounded forever. So now I can jump indefinitely. Luckily, if I stop playing because I changed that at runtime, it'll go away and reset back to the correct value. So let's save this off and do a quick commit because we've added a new layer, added the player layer. We've assigned the player to it, and we've swapped out the capsule collider, or the polygon collider, with a capsule collider. So say swapped polygon collider with capsule collider. And the final change that we did was add a layer mask check to the player. Added layer mask check to player. And I'm going to split these all into new lines in my commit. So I've got 3 lines of messages for my check-in, and hit the check-in button.